Good evening.
Executive Director for Special Education presenting tonight.
Thank you. Good evening. Tonight I will give you a brief update on 7 issues, so I'll just go through them briefly. I'd like to give you an update on staffing. Since I reported last, we had a few positions that remain to be filled. So I'm really excited that we have our new elementary program specialist, and that is John Shetler. And so I'm very, very pleased to have John join our team. I'm a little sad that I don't have an administrative secretary. I thought I did, but it didn't work out salary-wise and benefit-wise. So anyway, I don't have an administrative secretary. I do have staff secretary. She's started, and she's wonderful, Leticia Biscara, and she's bilingual, and she's a 4-hour secretary. I also have a Medi-Cal clerk. She started, and she's wonderful, and she's also bilingual, Carolina Aguilar, and she's also 4 hours. And the deaf and hard of hearing teacher, we still have not been able to fill. This was a really late notice. I told you before that our deaf and hard of hearing teacher resigned right before school year began. It's super hard to find a credentialed deaf and hard of hearing teacher, so we are still recruiting for that. We do have an excellent sub in place, so I'm happy about that. Quickly on department meetings, just to let you know, you have a list in front of you of all of the department meetings that have been held. They started in September as scheduled, and they will be continuing, so all of those department meetings have been held. Next, the special education procedural handbooks. Dr. Carol Miller has completed the drafts of both the certificated and the classified procedural manuals. We have been having people review it and provide input. So those that have reviewed and provided input to the certificated manual, myself, I've reviewed it and provided input. The directors, the program specialists, Lane Wheeler has been given a copy of it to provide input. And Dr. Dries Butterfield has also reviewed it and provided input. I'm also going to be asking the chair of the organization subcommittee from the stakeholders work group to review that as well. After all of the input is obtained, we are going to be sending it for a final legal review before distribution. Similarly, we have reviewed the classified procedural manual. Similarly, the same I've reviewed it, the directors, the program specialists, Paul Rooney, who's the president of CSEA and also a special ed instructional assistant, has reviewed it. Dr. Dries Butterfield and Elaine Alvarado have reviewed it. And similarly, I'm going to ask the chair of the organization subcommittee from the stakeholders to be reviewing that as well. The next update on staff special education parent advisory committee. So I have been in the process of recruiting members for this committee for a while. I've been asking principals to recruit parents and send me the name of a parent who could represent their school on this committee. So far, I've received names from 6 schools. So I'm still looking for members. I attended the SEEK meeting last week, and I got some good input regarding that process. So it was suggested that all parents need to know of that opportunity to participate. And so based on that, I'm going to be using Teleparent to do an English and a Spanish advertisement recruitment for the parent advisory group so that I can invite participation from those that are interested. And those that have already been selected, I'd like them to continue, and perhaps I can get an alternate member out of that process. I'm also still looking for a certificated representative, and as far as a classified representative, I have asked Paul Rooney, who is the president of CSEA, to be that classified member on the committee, and he has accepted. And I'm also looking for 1 additional administrator. So as soon as I have enough members, I will schedule our first meeting. The next, implementation of the priorities of special education. So to give you an update about that, Eric Hansey, who's our action plan manager, Dr. Carol Miller, and I have been reviewing each of the 198 action items. We've been identifying the resource, and that's the person who is responsible mostly for carrying out that action item. We've identified the resource, the level of completion that we feel that that action item is currently, and we're looking for the evidence to support that level of completion so that we can have a fairly accurate level of completion. We also have our target date for completion. So our goal is to bring a draft of our action plan to the next board meeting for your input. And that draft will then be taken to a follow-up meeting of the stakeholders where I will be providing an update regarding the action plan and also get some input from the stakeholders. The next topic is the training provided for Special Education Information System, or otherwise known as SACE. Julie Howard, who's our data specialist, has been doing a great job doing training all over. She's held 8 trainings, group trainings, and any certificated staff member could avail themselves of any of those 8. So far we've had 100 certificated staff members take advantage of that. And that was not a required training, so that was really very exciting that they went to that. And then we've also had, Julie has held an additional 4 sessions individually with brand new staff members. And then lastly, an update on the special education section of the district website. Again, Dr. Carol Miller has been working with our administrative services staff, that is Barbara Kayani and our communications department, with Linda Steele, our webmaster, in upgrading our current special education section. Some of the new features that we've added are the vision statement, and we've added a resources section listing state and local resources. We've added our special education services charts that came out of our program and services committee that talks about programs that we have currently, both in the district and regionally available. We have our special education administration contact information, and we are updating that as well. And we have some of the special education job descriptions. We plan on adding, we're just finishing our frequently asked questions and answers, and we'll be adding our special education organizational chart. And we are also having those things translated so that they can be available in Spanish. And that concludes my report.
Questions or comments? Mrs. Parker?
Quick question, 2 quick questions. One is the special ed procedural handbooks. I presume that, I don't know if teachers and principals were part of the original creation of the document, but in listening to your list of people who are looking at it, are you including like an experienced teacher and experienced principal on the list to
Well, the program specialists are all teachers,
Right.
and then Lane Wheeler from the certificated union is looking at it. So
and a principal?
I haven't asked a principal to do that.
Because I'm just thinking it might be an idea to,
Yeah.
since they're part of that whole thing as well.
Sure.
And then on the Special Ed Parent Advisory Committee, will you just set a starting meeting date at some point, even if you don't necessarily have everybody nailed down?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Right now, with only 6 members, I didn't feel like I could set a meeting. But next week, Barbara Kayani is going to help me do the teleparent. I've not
Okay.
done it before, so
Mhm.
she's going to help me get that set up, and then hopefully I'll get more members, and hopefully more principals will also be turning in names.
Okay, good, thank you.
Mrs. Sawaski, can you help on that with the principals?
Yes.
Thank you.
It's on my list as well.
Dr. Noel?
I hope you understand this comment. I really welcome the kind of routine, almost mundane report. It's such a joy. and it's a commentary on your skills as a leader.
Thank you.
I feel very hopeful for special education.
On the 100 staff members who've taken the training with these new computers I presume we bought, 100 out of how many?
Let's see, we have about 150 certificated staff.
And other 50 didn't do it just because they didn't have time on their schedules, but they're
No,
going to do it next
it
time
was a
around.
voluntary
Yeah,
training, so they were after school and,
well, it's voluntary.
and
there's-
maybe they thought that they already knew it, I'm not sure, but,
Okay, you'll find
we're
out,
still,
won't you?
we're still going to be offering more training.
Okay.
So, and they also call Julie regularly for any questions that they might have, and she helps them. Some come and see her, so she's very popular right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mrs. Deacon?
One bit of feedback I'd like to share, and I also appreciate all these trainings. And I know that last year we were kind of scrambling to put them all in place, but I heard from some staff, particularly classified staff, that if we could set a date before the end of the school year when the trainings would take place right before school starts, then they could plan their schedules better, because it was my understanding they didn't know what those dates were until quite late, and some of them were unavailable to attend and out of town. Is that an accurate
I don't
statement?
think so. You want to take the
I'm
microphone?
not talking about certificated stuff. I'm
Right,
talking about
classified,
the
classified.
aides that
Yeah.
a letter went out, but some of them were on vacation, didn't get it, and so if we could set those dates before the end of the school year for 2011.
The date for the classified instructional assistants was a date that was already planned to be the first day back for work. So they were already due to come back on that date. Nobody missed that date. There was communication during the summer to inform them what their role would be on that date, but it was not a surprise to anyone that it was that particular date.
Okay, all right, well, maybe there were some wires crossed somewhere, but I know that happens sometimes. Okay, thank you. And I know there's a programming committee meeting next week. Unfortunately,
Yes,
I won't be there.
Next Thursday.
But thank you for gearing that up. I
Yes.
appreciate that.
Okay, any further questions? Thank you very much. Good
Thank you.
report. Mrs. Jate? Mrs. Jate? Are you going to stay regardless through the next presentation to get to yours, or if we gave you 2 minutes right now? And you, because then would you leave? No, I just wanted, if you're going to stay anyway, then no problem. But if you are planning on would be leaving, I'd like to get. This will take 2 minutes. Okay, let's go to F5. Yeah, this will be 2 minutes, and Meg can get home and get a good night's sleep.
Good evening. Should I wait for Dr. Noel?
No, go ahead.
Okay. As you know, the Santa Barbara County Education Office has requested that all school districts submit a list of cuts with the first interim. And at the rate we're going, we'll probably have our first interim done before the state of California has their budget. We are asking that the Board of Education approve the following timeline for these cuts. And they are as follows. First reading of the Fiscal Solvency Plan Phase 4, November 9th, 2010. Second reading of the Fiscal Solvency Plan Phase 4, November 23rd. Presentation of the first interim financial report, December 14th. Notice of release of probationary and temporary staff and approval of reduction for particular kinds of services, March 8th, 2011. Final budget adoption, June 28th, 2011.
Okay.
Sorry.
Do you have a motion?
This is a conference agenda
Oh,
item,
okay,
correct?
we don't need a
Okay.
motion.
Well, let me note that this is a conference agenda item report, although Meg is asking for your approval of that timeline, and I think you would be wise to approve that timeline. So,
I'm happy to do that. I will move to approve the process and timeline for implementation of the 2011-12 budget reductions.
Second.
Now discussion. Seeing no discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried, 4-0.
Thank you.
One
Good
absent.
night.
Good night. Okay, we now go to F4, and I apologize to the principals, but, to get Meg out of here, it's good. Presentation of the Western Association of Schools and Colleges reports for Dos Pueblos High School and San Marcos High School. Mr. Caprito is not here. we will get to Santa Barbara High School at the next meeting.
Well, Board, all 3 comprehensive high schools completed their accreditation process this last year. They have final letters, they have final action plans, and to introduce this is Robin Swaski, our Associate Superintendent. But Sean, you can go ahead and come up. You're so eager to be
Come on
at the
up,
podium.
yes. Right, and as President Herron said, we are going to just have Dos Pueblos and San Marcos High School today, or this evening. And another reason for actually having Santa Barbara High School come at a later time is they are in year 3 program improvement, which calls for a restructuring plan. And we really would like to have that plan come at the same time as their WASC report and very soon after the single plan. So those should all be very much aligned and very targeted and focused. So I think it's, Dr. Caprito is out of town, but I think this is a better plan to have. So we have 2, and they are last on the agenda. I was going to say that.
Yeah, we don't have to take an hour, you know, with just 2.
We're saving the best for last, right?
Thank you,
The best
appreciate that.
report. So Principal Sean Carey is here for Dos Pueblos. She'll start, and then we'll finish up with San Marcos High School.
And it's my understanding that you have the sort of an executive summary of areas of strength and follow-up that you can be referring to. As I'm going to go through that, but in a streamlined fashion. There were far more school-wide areas of strength than were identified here. I want to appreciate publicly Dr. Sarvis for being present at our exit interview with the WASC committee. It was a very successful visit. In fact, I would say that we enjoyed their visit and that they enjoyed visiting our campus. But I've tried to consolidate them into these 6 points here. Regarding number 1, under school-wide areas of strength, the school has established a clear, coherent, and shared vision about closing the achievement gap, and that the staff embodies an excitement and willingness to make curricular, instructional, assessment, and student support services changes in order to improve student achievement. I just want to pause briefly here, and I won't do this on every point, but to talk about Dos Pueblos' involvement with Just Communities. We have a very rich and deep partnership with Just Communities. It is ongoing. Dos Pueblos was very fortunate to be chosen as one of the schools to participate in the Latino Achievement Summit that took place in August, and to be working on the action plans that were formulated there by various stakeholder groups in an ongoing way. I also want to highlight the fact that I'm very proud of our Triple E committee, which Triple E is Excellence in Equity in Education. Again, it's an offshoot of the PTSA, but it has subcommittees focused on academics, fundraising, and school relationships. And there are administrators, counselors, teachers, students, and parents on each of those subcommittees. So that's a very organic body that is able to take a look at and have honest dialogue about the achievement gap from multiple perspectives, since it is such a multifaceted challenge. I just want to highlight on number 2, I know that you have received some presentation tonight from Amir Shair, who was named a MacArthur Fellow in the last 24 hours. His engineering academy, which is in the process of being expanded, as I know you know, as well as our bridge program, the Charger Academy, are both good examples of just innovative things that our teachers do because they understand that that's what's best for learning, and they do that in spite of budget constraints and naysayers who say that things like this can't be done in public education these days. We have lots of examples of that at DP. I want to highlight in number 3 our Model School Site Council, ELAC, and PTSA organizations. The protocol that was used to develop the ELAC manual for the site came from our main DLAC representative and ELAC president, and so we're very proud of that protocol that evolved at DP. Numbers 4 and 5 speak for themselves as far as the source of pride that our co-curricular activities and facilities, recent facilities, large-scale facilities improvements, what the source of pride that those are for us. And regarding number 6 and the administrative team, I really want to point out that we've done something unique at DP, not unique in terms of schools in general, but unique for our history, which is to restructure our administrative team so that rather than every administrator having a share of the student body as a caseload, we do that to some degree. We've really tried to concentrate responsibilities under school safety and culture, athletics and activities, and curriculum instruction assessment. And we have found that that's allowed us to really become, it's just a way of working smarter, not necessarily harder, and doing a better job at providing services in all 3 of those areas that are much more meaningful and effective. As far as the school-wide critical areas for follow-up, and that's where I'll be emphasizing the remainder of my comments, as far as the PLC process goes, we have this year asked for, there has been some resistance in the past to explicit administrative directives or guidelines involving PLCs, given the contract waiver that is required for the late start schedule that is our main vehicle for teacher collaboration. Teachers have, of their own accord, been willing to give us names of people that they consider their PLC leaders, which has allowed us to kind of form a PLC leadership committee and to help this. We're at the beginning stages of this and have much room for improvement, which is why it's in this section, but has become for us a body of teacher leaders, some of whom are department chairs, some of whom are not necessarily, but to disseminate what we know to be effective instructional strategies and to really monitor whether those are happening and if they're not happening, why they're not, and how we can remedy that. I will say that because this involves various subject areas and all aspects of instruction, this is the first year we're in year 1 of program improvement as of school year 2010, 2011. I will say that we're very proud of the fact that of our subgroups, all but one subgroup improved significantly in their API scores. The subgroup that improved the most was Latino subgroup. So we feel like that is evidence, as we saw evidence district-wide, of not just gains, but actually an acceleration of gains there, which is in effect closing the achievement gap. That's number 2. As we skip down to ongoing school improvement, the additional document you have is our 1-page action plan. We were very keen in our self-study process to make an action plan that was accessible and that was not a multi-page document that was mainly prose, because we felt it would be much more just instructive for us and user-friendly, really, for lack of a better term, to be able to see both main areas for growth, one on each side, presented in a way where we felt it was really accessible, including the subtasks. There is a summary of them on the first page under ongoing school improvement. The first goal being to increase academic achievement, the second goal being to support students in a systemic way, not just in what I would say has characterized student support at DP historically, which is pockets of excellent student support, no systemic overarching kind of student support. So you can see here that under academic achievement, various tasks, 7 of them, we did contract Jonathan Lemaster, who's been a consultant to the district, for his expertise. He worked with our teachers during our pre-service days on literacy strategies. We have much room to grow in terms of EduSoft. I would say that that's probably our most critical area, or where we are most efficient and where we need to really focus our energies moving forward. Under number 3, we're familiar by now with the adoption of Read 180, but also our English intensive classes. We are running one class at each grade level of what we're calling English intensive, and having in-house teachers coordinate with district personnel and also to generate curriculum for us on site. In terms of training teachers for differentiating curriculum delivery for all students, task 5, we do have representatives that will be participating in the academic coherence teams, which have formed in the absence or the disintegration of GATE-identified courses, moving to honors courses. And in terms of ensuring alignment to the curriculum, we feel that we are very aligned to standards, California standards, even as they are changing and we're moving to national standards. We think that that's going to be a really good move. And where we're focusing most there is on our special education staff, making sure that they are also delivering access to standards, the same standards that the general education teachers are providing. Briefly on goal 2, which is about support for student growth. Last year, there was a major campaign on our campus to launch what we were calling III, and the 3 I's are represented by tasks 1, 2, and 3 there. They stand for initiation, intervention, and incentive. So the proposal last year was to go to a lengthened lunch period, which would allow us to do initiation with freshmen, a uniform way of having them identify with the school, get familiar with school support services. Intervention was meant to target any D or F student or any student struggling with a particular subject matter. And incentive was an aspect that would invite students who were successful to turn around and then be mentors to the students who were needing the intervention. The initiative did not pass, There was a overwhelming staff mandate, but we ran into problems with instructional minutes, frankly, and some of the legalities, and also I think ran into problems with just the school year ending and time. That conversation is being resurrected this week as we speak. So this is an ongoing. We still feel that we have 30% of our students who are earning either a D or F in one of their academic courses. We feel that's unacceptable. What we've done as a stopgap measure is to impose really a sequence of interventions that was drawn up by our AVID team at AVID Training this summer that has 6 steps and requires teachers to document phone calls home and other attempts to communicate when a student any of their students are struggling in their classes, and by struggling I mean earning a D or an F. So we have that as kind of a Band-Aid while we are resurrecting the kind of conversation that informed our III proposal. I think I'm going to leave it at that. Is that like, but hopefully that at least it just illustrates a little better, gives you some more information about what you see here and what that actually looks like or means for us on our campus. And I know you might have questions.
Dr. Noel.
I'd just like I would appreciate you explaining this reorganization of your administration. The focus on culture interests me a lot.
On the school culture.
Yeah.
So previously, really what we found was that we shared so if we have an enrollment of 2,400, we had each AP responsible for about 800 students. Each AP was responsible for one grade level, 12, 11, 10, and we split the 9th graders by alpha. So we each had a portion of the 9th grade class. What we found in doing that where there were so many constant interruptions just dealing with the student services part of our jobs, whether it was discipline referrals or a student enrolling or just a student having a conflict with another student or teacher, that APs had very little time freed up to actually focus on generating or sustaining better systems for doing things, even disciplinary things. So at this point, Assistant Principal Jorge Fulco oversees. We concentrated that student services aspect of what administrators do in the Office of School Safety and Discipline. Jorge Fulco is responsible then for 9th, 10th, and 11th graders. We still have the person who oversees activities athletics overseeing seniors who tend to have fewer discipline problems, especially in the second half of the year, and the graduation activities and participation are on the line. And then we have the third administrator, or AP, in charge of curriculum instruction assessment, oversees the Bridge program and those students. So, who had been a more intensive group to oversee, although through the changes made possible by the Academy are now not so much that. So that just allows the AP who's overseeing school safety and culture to not only deal with those interruptions that come about inevitably when you're working in an office that is defined that way, but then to actually focus on systems, whether they be detention systems or Saturday schools or proactive systems for incentives for student behavior that have minimized the problems that we have with poor student behavior to a palpable extent. I mean, it feels different on our campus now as compared to 2 years ago in terms of when it's class time, we don't see students walking around. Students are in classes bell to bell. There's a much higher degree of compliance with our expectations, especially concerning attendance.
Okay, thank you.
Mrs. Deacon?
Thank you. This was a lot to digest, and I appreciate your being able to condense it like this, even though I'm sure we all read the fine print. But one of the things that really jumped out at me on your first sheet here was that where you wrote, the school not only has the will, but the capacity to be successful. And I really appreciate that, because I think we see over and over again, you have to have both. And I think that the efforts that you're making to address the achievement gap, the specifics that you're providing, the things that you anticipated through the WASC committee that you're now already doing, show us that you're really addressing those things head on. And I think we need persistence, perseverance, this kind of laser-like focus on instruction, and I appreciate the efforts. I also appreciate the the broad representation that I think you've got in your parent community for this achievement gap issue, because this group, Excellence and Equity in Education, I think was a broadly based group, and yet when we had our Honors Gate discussion, you saw parents from all walks of life coming and recognizing the importance of that, and WASC anticipated, both in your case and in San Marcos, the need to have a more robust representation of underrepresented students in those higher level classes, so I really appreciate that. I also appreciated what you talked about just a minute ago about working smarter, because I noticed one of the comments was that there's a disconnect, there was a perceived disconnect on the part of the staff between district directives and successful implementation with a lack of resources. And the truth is we know the resources aren't going to come roaring back, and so we do have to work smarter, and we have to be more effective and more efficient at what we do. And so I mean, your description of this realignment of the administrators, I think, is a good example of a way to address those kinds of issues, so I appreciate that as well. So just overall, I'd like to say thank you for the efforts you've made, and keep it up. I know it's hard work, but we saw earlier with Mr. Shair what great things can happen, you know, with that kind of constant, diligent focus and just always moving forward. And I see that happening at all levels of the administration at DP, so thank you for that.
Thank you.
Mrs. Parker.
I'll echo Mrs. Deacon's comments. I thought that this was a really helpful report to look at, and I did really appreciate the extensive sort of gate honors discussion that was going on. It was sort of, it's enlightening now to reflect back on that and the discussion that was going on at the sites, at the high schools in particular, and issues that visiting committees were bringing up. I wanted just to call out a couple of things. Maybe one is the comments that were made about the no electronics in school policy. That's actually something that Mrs. Deacon and I witnessed a discussion going on with teachers around that in a Jonathan Lemaster training at one point. But it's been so interesting to see what a positive effect it's had on school culture beyond student learning in classrooms, but in school culture and the way teachers perceive that. So that's been positive to see. What else did I call out here? Again, of course, we were paying, I'm sure, all particular attention to the couple of questions around governing board policies, and are we delegating appropriately and monitoring the results. And I think again and again it came back to a lack of resources, and gosh darn, that governing board doesn't give us what we need to do the things that they want us to do. And I'm so sorry that the state has not allowed us to do that for you, but we do recognize that anything we can do in terms of policy, and I wish it could be in terms of money. One question that I had, and it might be more for Dr. White, but it might also be for you, Carrie, and that's on page 45, there was a question about to what extent do students and teachers use assessment results to enhance the educational progress of every student? And there was just a comment that although the district has common assessments for some content areas, teachers are not consulted or involved in their development. And I don't know if one of you wants to comment on how teachers are involved or not involved in the process of creating common assessments.
I'll start and I'll let Dr. White chime in. Teachers are they're certainly provided the opportunity to participate and give input where it comes to assessments in English and math. Our teachers have been given that opportunity. I don't know if you want to talk more about that, but through LEAP and through the formation of benchmark exams, that's the process and the vehicle for that speaks to those, you know, common district assessments.
Right, and the common district assessments are math and language arts. And for language arts, 5 years ago through the LEAP process, we looked at what benchmarks to use. And at that time, we had anticipated adopting a new program and purchasing it. So we started out by using the Holt assessments in language arts with the anticipation that we would have new ones in 2 years. Now that didn't happen. We did adopt the Read 180 program that has a common assessment, the lexiling of students. And so that actually has been a discussion as to whether lexiling students would be an appropriate benchmark for English language arts. There are a couple problems with that. Technologically, we're not ready for that. So that's one thing. And then it wouldn't cover all of the California standards. So currently on the table right now with the English language arts teachers is whether to consider using the action learning system benchmark for ELA, which is the benchmarking system that Adelante and Franklin and McKinley used last year. It has a very high correlation between the CST and that benchmark. There are two different types of benchmarks that we're using in the district. One is called a chunking, where you look at chunks of material, and the other one is to test, if you will, all of the standards 3 or 4 times a year. And so the ALS system, the action learning system, is a system that tests all of the standards 3 or 4 times a year, but it is highly predictive. With math, we went through a math adoption process, and through that process we created an academic coherence team, and in fact, Dos Pueblos' math department was highly engaged in developing the benchmarks that we use for math across the district.
Okay, that answers that question. Okay, thank you.
Why is EduSoft so hard to implement, get teachers to use?
I think we have, to me, the weakest part of the cycle where you use data to drive instruction has been that assessment of student performance data to then inform reteaching. And that's happening. That's not necessarily not happening with teachers, but it hasn't been happening in a cohesive way in course-alike groups. And so what we need there, and it's been offered, but we have not availed ourselves of it, and this is where we're deficient, is we need to avail ourselves better of the expertise of Wayne Cole. He's certainly been willing. He has come out to work with interested individual teachers and even departments, but we need to avail ourselves more of his expertise and training and availability. We do have some sort of infrastructure needs there. We do need some more machines that will help us use that better, but we have sufficient to be using that at a higher capacity than what we're currently doing.
How about Edline for communication with parents?
That's an expectation. So part of our sequence of interventions, I mean, just this bottom paragraph that says ongoing school improvement, our most recent September staff meeting had 2 components. The first was student support through this Band-Aid I'm calling the sequence of interventions. Step 1 of that is that teachers keep Edline records updated on a weekly basis. At least once a week are posting grades to Edline so that parents and students can see them.
Good.
So that's a school-wide expectation at this
Thank
point.
you. Mrs. Parker?
Edline did come up regularly, and I guess this is a question for Dr. Hayden, and that is, what's the difference between Edline and the online parent portal to Aries? And I know Santa Barbara High has the Aries portal in place, and other places have Edline. So what's that about?
Edline is a more sophisticated program and has more features and is much more user-friendly. It's not that the Aries program wouldn't work in many cases, and it's not that it's a bad program. It's just there is a quality difference between the 2 of them that most teachers address. So Edline, unfortunately, has been promising to make itself so that the data can be downloaded up and down between Aries and Edline for maybe 4 years now, and they've just never delivered it. If that ever happened, then I imagine we would all go to Edline, and all the schools would, and actually a lot of schools are anyway. Aries doesn't actually say that it is a, Aries concentration is on student information, and so their grade book and their parent portal and some of those things are sort of like add-ons to Aries. They function, but they're not sophisticated.
It is a shame, though. We have to give different activation codes for Edline access and also for the online portal for attendance, say, through Aries.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have Norm Clevenger and Ed Behrens from San Marcos High School. And I want to note in the, they are the next school that has the packet here. And you probably knew as you read through that their letter that in the case of Dos Pueblos kind of started it and their strengths, there is a piece that they're going to be speaking to that starts right after the end of Dos Pueblos, and it says WASC report to the board 9/28. And so it's just a couple pages in front of their letter.
Thank you. President Herron, board members, Dr. Sarvis. It's a pleasure to address you about our WASC experience. You have a number of documents. I believe you have a copy of the WASC visiting report. You have a copy of our action plan, as well as my speaking points, which is a WASC report to the board. I've asked Ed Behrens to be here this evening. Ed's kind of our right-hand man, and he took over while I was on medical leave in working with our leadership team to rewrite our action plan. So if there are specific questions, I wanted to have him here to do that. First of all, obviously, we're very pleased that we got a 6-year accreditation with a 3-year midterm, and so we're accredited through 2016. It was an interesting visitation for us. One of the things that happened is that through the WASP process, you work with a visiting chair over about 6 to 9 months. And they help you with editing your plan, putting your data together, putting it in such a way that their committee is going to be prepared to work with that. And we had worked with a chair only to find out that there was a medical emergency and our chair was replaced 3 days before the visit. So it was a little more exciting than maybe it needed to be, but obviously we did a quality job, and I really want to commend our parents and staff for the long time that they putting the self-study together. In just kind of synopsizing school areas of strength, the co-curricular and extracurricular activities, as you probably all well know at San Marcos High School, are exemplary. And this was one of their commendations. And there are 3 items that speak to the culture of the school that I think is very important. Students truly value their many positive experiences, including relationships with caring staff members. Students feel that they're treated with respect and trust, and in turn, act in a mature and responsible manner. And the San Marcos High School culture provides an educational setting which nurtures learning, responsibility, and respect among all stakeholders. And I think that's very important. And they also commended our support staff for the amount of resources that they provide. One of the interesting things about a WASC document and an action plan is it's a living document. And what's kind of nice is even though this was finalized in April with the rewriting of our action plan, we already have some progress that's been made on some of the areas of need that they've talked about. So it's an opportunity to add those in here. One of the areas of critical areas, instructional sequencing of transitioning EL students from SEDI into regular classes. And they wanted us to look at developing an effective standards-based program for an EL program to support the needs of our English learners. We've actually started contracting last year with SBCEO. We've had a number of teachers who have been trained in SEDI pretty extensively. Matter of fact, Dr. Sarvis was on our campus this morning and got to sit in on one of the trainings for, I believe it was English and social science this morning. This is an ongoing process that I think will yield some real positive results for us. Implement more scheduled options for that will allow underperforming students to take year-long classes in core areas, and we're doing that currently with Read 180. All of our EL students, all of our transitioning EL students all take English all year, which for us is 2 classes. Also, our bridge students take 2 English and 2 math classes. So it's an opportunity in our 4x4 schedule to really focus on some core emphasis and support for those students. Focus on English, language arts, and math, and closing the achievement gap. And I was particularly pleased to see our API results, which I've sort of synopsized here, that show over time that we have been able to close the achievement gap. With the exception of special ed, which I think is kind of an anomaly, that's the only area that we didn't make our API this year. You'll see that subgroups, the white subgroup gained 19 points between 2005 and 2010. In that same time frame, our Latino students gained 49 points. Our EL subgroup gained 29 points, and our socioeconomically disadvantaged gained 44 points. So over the past 5 years, you can see some considerable narrowing of the gap, achievement gap in this area. Another critical area that they added to their list, improve instructional strategies so that all teachers are maximizing the advantage of the 90-minute block. And that's unique to us. We have a 90-minute block. Part of what we're learning in SEDI is an effective use of that. One of the things that we are working on currently, we did some training at the beginning of the school year where all class had SEDI training and all teachers, had AVID training. And those two areas focused on maximizing the use of a 90-minute period. We're also currently working, and it starts on Thursday, in using the book that we've all been given, Teach Like a Champion. And if you've read that book, you'll see there's a number of opportunities in there to focus on maximizing use of class time. And so we'll be doing exercises with our whole staff using that model. Action plan, develop an effective program. This is our rewrite and kind of a synopsis of the action plan that you have. Support and address the needs of our English learners. Some of this is going to be repetitious because it carries over from one subject to another. But I mentioned before that we've really greatly increased our EL program. We've provided our teachers with a lot of data so that they really know who these students are, what their academic capabilities are. They have CST scores, they have grades, they have CELT scores, and they also know what those scores represent as far as students' ability levels. And we're working with this SEDI group of teachers, 13 of them, to really improve their strategies in teaching to those students. And I think it's going to make a continued big difference. Let me just skip down here a little bit to some of the other areas here. As I mentioned before, we've contracted with the County Office of Education to work with us on this program. We have an EL coordinator that's my assistant principal that has an opportunity to be in the classroom, working with teachers on their instructional needs, giving them data on a regular basis about student achievement so that they really have an accurate reading of who the students are, and it's a large population on our campus, and what their capability and how they're doing from week to week. So I think it's very important, this new position, this first time we've had an EL coordinator. We looked into, and hopefully there's something called a 4-pack, which in general is a group of English teachers that have specific strengths in either reading, writing, listening, or speaking. And we were trying to pair up teachers so that students could go to an individual teacher for a portion, 30-minute portion of each period to get emphasis in speaking, reading, writing. Our master schedule this year didn't allow us to do that, but we're not throwing this away because we think it'll be a worthwhile opportunity if we can make it work within our schedule in the future. We've also worked with La Cumbra, who has showed, as you know, some remarkable success academically with their students. And one of the things that we find unique about this group of students is that they have not had a lot of academic support in the home, and they've learned to support each other in school. And one of the things that was a problem when they went from La Cumbra to the larger high school is those kids were scattered throughout all the classes, and the support that they had for each other was no longer available. So we have a group, a posse of about 60 students that are grouped in Algebra 2 and Geometry, as well as Honors English, so that they can continue to support each other in those efforts. So we'll wait to see those results, but I expect those to be positive as well. Goal number 2 is mathematics, and I think that's one of our areas of need as well. We haven't shown quality academic improvement in mathematics over the years. We've worked with our mathematics. They have regular quarterly, which is every 4.5 weeks for us, standards-based assessments. They're using EduSoft with the results. They're talking about them in their PLCs. It's also, we have CDI classes in math that are working with the same cadre that I just mentioned before. Our math teachers have some extensive training in using the textbooks that they currently are working with. And they're also getting continued training in AVID. A number of our math teachers are AVID teachers as well. So I think that the carryover from the AVID strategies and CDI strategies is going to pay off for this group in the future. We have a homework club that's after school. Students can drop in at any time and get help, but it's mostly students who are assigned. Students are assigned because they're missing an assignment, they have work to make up, or they need extra help on a particular lesson, or they need to go in and study for an exam that's coming up. And math teachers especially are making good use of the homework club after school on a regular basis. And our final goal was obviously general academic success for the school. And it's kind of a repeat of what we've been doing in math, but we're also doing CDI and AVID in our science and social science classes. And they're taking advantage of homework. Added to this, we also have Casey. We have Casey before and after school for 10th graders that are on the cusp of possibly becoming proficient, and we want to help them along to that cause. We also have mandated Casey classes for every 11th and 12th graders who have not passed one or the other of the Casey exams, and that's a necessary part of their schedule. So we have a number of 11th and 12th graders that are still taking 4 classes because they need Casey as well. So that's kind of a synopsis of where we are and where we're going, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Questions, comments? Mrs. Deacon?
Mix it up a little bit.
Okay, yeah, a good idea. Thank you. And I appreciate how you've called out the areas of strengths and weaknesses here. I don't think anyone could argue that San Marcos doesn't have a fabulous co-curricular program in so many ways. I mean, I heard your singers the other night at back to school night, and we know those are wonderful things. I also think this POSSE program is great. We saw your AVID students here tonight. I know there's a real nurturing environment on your campus, and you can feel that when you're on the campus, and that's great. Let me ask you a couple of harder questions. I probably would have liked to have seen academic achievement as #1 on the list rather than co-curricular, just because I think ultimately that's where we need to focus. I'm wondering about this piece about transitioning students from CDI, these sheltered classes. In the critical area, it says transitioning them into regular classes, but it sounds like you've beefed up the sheltered classes. So what is the next step? I mean, how do we move them into the regular classes?
What we found, and this, when I first came to San Marcos High School, we had about 4 CDI classes. And CDI classes were only ELD students having CDI classes in math or science or social science. And we have a number of students who were EL students who were in the college prep classes and not doing well, and not being supported, and not being taught in a manner that would allow them to be successful. So we have focused our efforts in the EL program to beef up that area, which is kind of transitioning out of ELD and into CP, and that's the focus of the EL program that we're working on right now, to get them to transition out of ELD and to be ready and prepared for college prep.
Okay, so the movement from the sheltered classes into college prep, what's the plan there to move?
Well, the plan is that they're being taught with CDI methods. and not the strictly college prep that they're a little bit reticent to be successful with. It's still college prep material, it's still college prep, it's the same curriculum.
Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you. That clarifies that. And let's see. I had one other. I appreciate the Teach Like a Champion. I read the book too. It's great. And with those 90-minute blocks, it seems like you really have, there's challenges and great opportunities in the block system.
Absolutely.
And it seems like taking advantage of some of these in those 90-minute blocks is great. On pages. Let's see, I've written this down. Starting on page 9, and for the next 10 pages, and this is math, and I know you've identified that as a critical area, but, over and over again, there are these sentences that say things like math is a definite area of improvement. And so I guess I'm really hopeful. I know you've delineated your plan to get there, but there's a sentence in here that says there's been little or no changes in 6 years in math. I think, I know as a board member, I'm really looking for that to change, and
So are we,
okay. All right, well, thank you very much.
certainly.
Mrs. Parker?
And I'll piggyback on that by saying that although it's particularly called out in San Marcos in terms of the math, I really see secondary math, particularly for students that have come in at algebra for 9th grade, is district-wide something that our high schools are really struggling with, moving those students forward. So I appreciate your laser-like focus on that. What would I ask? I appreciated the comment, the WASP comment on improving instructional strategy so that all teachers take maximum advantage of the 90-minute block period. Obviously, at block schools, you're cramming a year's worth of work into one semester, but also those 90 minutes, it's not the same as double what's going on at a traditional school. So it's also fewer minutes over time. And in fact, over the course of 4 years, it ends up being almost a year fewer of instructional minutes in a class like English, for example. So it's so important that be bell-to-bell instruction. And if that has been an issue at San Marcos, I guess one of my questions is, beyond strategies, what sort of monitoring are you doing? Because you'd really need to stay in a classroom for the entire time to be sure that what's going on.
Well, there are two areas. Obviously, as far as our staff development, that's a focus of ours in a number of levels. But it's also a focus of ours in our teacher evaluations. And we have pretty much half of the staff that's being evaluated every year. And so those are full times that we are in the classroom observing teachers, and we do walkthroughs as well. So we have comments about just effective use of time. I particularly loved Teach Like a Champion because it was so practical. It had so many quality strategies that teachers could use if they had only thought about how much time they would save and how much more efficient, how much more effective these, small little, ideas will make for them. And it's an obvious focus of us as a staff development for the entire staff that I think it will catch hold, and that a number of things will be adopted by our teachers who can really make use out of these.
Good. And in here, you also mentioned that staff is starting to look at means to measure the effectiveness of the block schedule. Additionally, School Improvement Committee has explored concerns with study hall and dismissal times, but looking at other schools with the same block schedule. How is that developing? What is?
Well, we had a committee last year that we had worked with for quite some time, where we studied a number of the other 4x4s up and down the state to see, one of our immediate concerns is AP. One of our other concerns is how we do on STAR. As an objective look, if a student finishes their biology class in January and we don't test them till May, how much are they going to retain? And the other portion is those that are taking it from January to June, are they far enough along that they've had all the standards that they need for that subject? So there are some issues with testing in particular that are unique to a 4x4 schedule. We've done some reviews for STAR that we think have been helpful, and I think they showed up in our API and STAR scores from last year. So we will continue to do those, and we may even increase the number of those that we do. There's a lot of research out there that says quality teaching over time, in other words, when kids have a chance in a block schedule to learn something in more depth, that it stays with them longer. And I think that we still firmly believe that that's a product of the block, and they still do that in colleges. So apparently they think that the learning is particularly good in a 90-minute block if it's done in a quality way.
Okay. Dr. Noel?
I want to reinforce what Mr. Parker was pointing at. I'm looking here at your critical areas. Number 6, improve instructional strategies so that all teachers effectively utilize the 90 minutes. And as I read that, I just thought, boy, this question has been around a long time. I'm just surprised that question is still around for San Marcos. I recall it being raised in the past some years ago. Another thing that I'm kind of puzzled by, number 3 on that list says, this is the WASC committee, the academic achievement gap between subgroups in some subject areas is widening. And yet back here under the WASC report to the board, first page, it says our achievement gap in subgroups has shown significant narrowing in recent API. I don't quite understand how those two statements stand side by side.
Well, understand that when they wrote this, they didn't have an opportunity to look at our 2010 CST scores in STAR or our API. And, you know, those were significantly better than they were the year before. And so in contrast, we made some phenomenal gains this last year. And I think that, you know, they didn't have that to look at because those scores weren't available yet.
Well, but as I look at your data, I see, for example, in math, algebra, 7% in 2006, up to 9% in 2009.
Correct.
Is that what you're referring to?
That's correct.
The interim being a drop to 2% and staying at 2% in 2007, 2008. Mm-hmm. So sure, if you just look at 2007, 2008, it looks terrific, from 2% to 9%, but it went down from 7% to 2% in the intervening years, and I would hope that the verbiage notwithstanding that these numbers would be very prominent in the thinking on the campus.
Well, they are. I mean, math is, you know, there's no bones about it. That's a great concern of ours. You know, over time, we have not made the kind of gains that we should be making. I'm working with the math department this year. I don't have an answer as of yet other than what my experience tells me, which is that it's standards-based, and you use standards assessment, and you use the data that you get from those regular standard assessment to design your lessons.
Let me offer a hypothesis.
Certainly.
90 minutes may be too long for a math period for 9th graders in algebra. Block system, I hear the pros, but I also have to wonder about some of the possible limitations.
Well,
that's a hypothesis. You can do with it what you wish.
Mrs. Parker.
I will say that at La Cumbre Junior High, which probably has the most successful algebra program, especially for disadvantaged students, they add a flex time to their regular period so that the kids have at least 20 minutes of extra instruction, which of course at the junior high level, a typical class is only about 45 minutes, so it's not taking it up to 90, but it is certainly longer. But I guess, and maybe this is a question for Dr. Hayden, the 8th grade algebra classes, since they went to CPM math, have shown a pretty dramatic jump in test scores. And I think when the first year that 8th grade was using CPM, there was going to be a high school, like one high school class that used CPM to compare it with a just a regular class. And I don't know if that actually happened, or if it didn't happen. I certainly haven't heard any results, but is there any thought of moving or testing out CPM at the 9th grade algebra level to see if that could have the same effect there?
Well, actually, Norm and I could both respond to that. There was that proposal to do exactly what you're saying, but it was never actually carried out, from my understanding. It was never carried out properly at the school site, so we don't actually have any data to take a look at it. And is that correct?
We did have we had 2 classes taught by the same teacher, one with CPM and one with the other textbook for math. Unfortunately, and the other was we had a student teacher, which sort of muddied the waters a little bit, and it wasn't as true. And the only comparisons we would have would be one teacher with CPM with another teacher with the regular text. And that's not as, well, it's just not as appropriate when you're looking at, you don't have a control group that way because of the influence of 2 different teachers. But we did find success, and it's mostly the teacher that we had that worked with CPM was very pleased with the results.
Well, I guess I would just add in that clearly doing the same thing over and over and over again for lots of years is not working for any of our high schools, for 9th grade algebra in particular. And it may be time to experiment further.
Yeah, well, I think that we are. I mean, one of the things that this sort of a misnomer is 9th grade algebra. Most people think that that's Algebra 1, and we find that a number of students come to us totally unprepared for algebra. And so we have Algebra A-B, which means it's basically 2 years worth to get through. We also have Algebra A-B-C, which are students that would take actually 3 classes to get through. And so those initial A classes are mostly pre-algebra and even general math brush up because their skills are not to the point that they're ready for algebra.
So if you have a student that's in Algebra A-B as a freshman, for example, are they taking Algebra A in the fall and then Algebra B in the spring?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hey, and also thank you to Dr. White for facilitating the WASC visits and all of the parts that go into organizing such a big event and all the visiting teams and all.
Good, thank you. Item G, return to the consent item. We do need to approve D7 with the exception of that one item that we put off till next week. Do I have a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
Discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried, 4-0, 1 absent. Coming events, H. You gave us a list during your superintendent's report. Does anything else? No? Okay. Future agenda items, Mrs. Parker.
I'm hoping that we can pretty quickly talk about a couple of board policies and their relationship to the ASCC. Activity, supervision, okay. It affects 2 board policies, and there's a choice that the board needs to make about how some employees and volunteers are background checked, and we need to take a look at that.
And we have that on the list already, and thank you for the work in finding the CSBA sample language on the board policy.
Well, that was thanks to the CSBA training this weekend.
It paid off for us.
Yes, in many ways. Mr. Deacon?
Continuing with our theme relative to Prop 19, well, first of all, before I got on the board, I know there was a discussion and a look at drug-sniffing dogs on campus.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering if it's time to go back and look at that again. And it seems to me it's not real expensive, but I do see some escalation of drug-related issues on campus, and I'm wondering if that's not something that we could revisit. The second piece, and this is for Santa Barbara High, you know, it still is our only school, and I've talked to Dr. Sarvis about this, without a resource officer. And I think, I don't know how we do this, but I would really like to put our heads together and see if we can't do something. I know we collaborated with the city on crossing guards. I don't know, but I just think that that school is hurting from lack of a resource officer, and I would really like to make that a priority.
I know one of the items Mrs. Parker has sent to me, and I think it's on your agenda, but just to make sure, it's the determining whether we need to continue monitor or approving class fundraisers or school fundraisers. It does say the board or a designated entity. So I think Mrs. Parker would like that on.
Yes, I'd assumed that that was going to be
Yeah.
coming forward.
We have that on the list as well.
Good, thank you.
Okay, we'll adjourn this meeting at 10:30.
Thank you.